So obviously these items we're auctioning for you are just a tiny fraction of the Foundation's collection and Ray's huge body of work. I wondered if you could enlighten everyone how many pieces are in the collection, and perhaps you have a few favourites you could highlight for us.
Yes, well, there's an estimated 50,000 items in the collection, and that stems from some of the first work that Ray carried out in the early 1930s through to projects he was working on shortly before he passed away in 2013. So it spans these 9 decades of his life, and it's very, very extensive. I think we use the Axial Collections database software, which is the same CMS that's used by the Academy and the BFI and the Imperial War Museum, and I'd say we're some way through cataloguing the key items in the collection. I think we've got about 14,000 of the items properly catalogued and identified, so there's still a long way to go as we work through all of Ray's documentation and photography, his mould collection, his library. I mean, this list goes on. Ray really did keep everything. It's not an exaggeration to say that he kept everything together, and we are working through that and discovering new treasures all the time. You know, all it will take is a rummage through a box that maybe hasn't been completely catalogued, and you'll find a sketch or a drawing or an armature or a little clay prototype of a model that Ray had worked upon at some point in the past and had been put in a drawer and tucked away. And when you're the first person to see those, you feel like you feel like an archaeologist. You feel you're discovering these creations for the first time in years. So it's an incredible collection. There's still more to be learned from it, definitely, as we continue to work through Ray's archive. In terms of personal favourites, you can't look past something like the Cyclops from the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. It exists now only in armature form, but that model, that creature, was so important in Ray's filmography in terms of the amount of directors and filmmakers that one creature inspired. But I really love looking through more of the personal artifacts as well. I'm not an animator or a filmmaker, but I find Ray's work ethic and his capacity as someone who could spin multiple plates at once and focus on what was important without getting flustered. So when you read Ray's diaries, for example, we have a diary that Ray kept as a 19-year-old, and he was just so single-minded about wanting to become an animator in the film industry. You read these pieces, and every day it's some way of, chasing up contacts or going to night class or going to film school or trying to get in touch with Willis O'Brien, the man who'd inspired him so much, trying out different ideas. Some of them worked, some of them didn't work. In his spare time, going to see King Kong. We've got a little note where he went to see King Kong with his best friend Ray Bradbury, and he's got in brackets next to it, 35th time, exclamation mark. And this is, in the 1930s, you had to go to the cinema, you had to make that trip to watch King Kong. And so this, I suppose that aspect as well of because I never got to meet Ray personally, I'm building up this picture of a very remarkable man through the artifacts that he left behind.
You've touched on this a little bit already, but Ray's influence with current generation of filmmakers and future generations of filmmakers probably. How do you see that and feel about Ray's legacy?
It's an interest, because somebody asked me this recently, like, what would the film industry look like if Ray hadn't existed? And it's a bit like thinking, like, what would the music industry be like if the Beatles hadn't been around? This hole, this gap where such an inspirational person had been. Ray, I think, inspired so many directors and so many artists and filmmakers. Steven Spielberg, George Lucas was quoted as saying that without Ray Harryhausen there'd be no Star Wars. John Landis has said that Ray's The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad was the film that made him want to become a director, and this story can be repeated so many times. We have a poster in our collection which is The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Rings, back in 2001. And in the middle, Peter Jackson's written, "Ray, none of this would have happened without you." And that's the Lord of the Rings were very important films to me when I was growing up. So these films continue to inspire. When you think that Clash of the Titans is now almost 45 years old. So that's Ray's most recent film, but it's not really that recent, but yet his films are just as popular as ever, if not more so. They're still on television regularly. Whenever we host screenings of Ray's films, many of them have been restored in 4K. Cinemas are packed out with people wanting to watch these movies as they're meant to be seen. So Ray continues to inspire, and it's hard to imagine what the face of blockbuster cinema would have been without his influence and without his films. And the time that Ray was making his movies as well, of course, particularly in the 70s, he was kind of this one-man oasis making these classic style fantasy family adventures, where there weren't many movies like that being made. I mean, right up until Star Wars in 1977, it was really just Ray making these wonderful epics of the imagination. And of course, Star Wars was heavily influenced by Ray. So if you think of the type of films that are screened now and that continue to make billions and billions of dollars, they all hold their roots somewhere in Ray's own creations, and he's still being credited by up-and-coming directors to this day. Guillermo del Toro is a wonderful director who also has been making a lot of incredible stop-motion animation in recent years. His Pinocchio, I think, was a real work of art, and he speaks quite regularly about how Ray's work influenced him. So yeah, I think some of the other things that are interesting about Ray's influence is that it's not just actors and filmmakers. At the foundation, we've been speaking to people from all kinds of backgrounds, musicians, rock musicians, people who were in bands like the Ramones and the Stranglers and other groups who speak about seeing Ray's films when they were younger, and that creativity, I suppose, inspiring them in different ways, not necessarily wanting to become an animator, but that encouragement that if you've got something to say, you just have to focus and find a way of expressing yourself.